if you remember the 1984 movie, The Terminator, and the final scene in which the heroine rides off with the snow-capped mountains, and the title says there's a storm coming, you guess right, because you got the perfect storm coming in the form of assessments, appraisals, RITAs, ARCPs, and training assignments. I cannot say this enough. This is probably the most important section of your application form, one of the most. So do go through these and the criteria very carefully. You need a total of 6 appraisals, one every year. If you do work in the UK, this would be a fairly standard process, and you would have your appraisals to hand. You just collect them, tabulate them together and submit. If you are from abroad and you have appraisals from abroad, as I did, you again just have to collect, get it validated and submit. If you are from abroad and you do not have a system of appraisals, that's where it gets tricky. The options are you can get a letter from a consultant whom you worked with, essentially detailing and covering most of the things which would be completed in a UK-based appraisal. I've been told that this does get accepted as evidence. Now, we come to the more important part, the PBA and the CBD section. A common question I got asked initially was, where do we get the PBA forms from? They are available on the JCST website to download. They are available on Google as well. Some subspecialty organizations have their own PBAs and CBDs. For example, the BES have their own one for stabilizations, as I've shown on the right side. Now, as far as PBAs are concerned, it's not enough to just tick, as is shown here, to just put SSS or N. So they say that block entries of satisfactory are not accepted, and you do need to show evidence of progression. So for example, if you start doing a total hip replacement, when in your first few procedures, you would be expected to have a grade 2/3, and towards the end of your either your posting or fellowship, you should have at least a grade 4 and ideally multiple grade 4 assessments from 2 different trainers. I believe the current criteria are you need at least 3, but this is something you need to verify. Again, remember, PBAs and logbooks need very strict cross-referencing. It's important to do your PBA and for it to be dated on the same day as it's shown on your logbook. They do these cross-checkings, and it's often this happens because you may do your logbook a few months later, and when you're doing a mass entry, there is a tendency to get the dates wrong. I did a cross-checking before submitting my application, and I found that some of the dates I had entered initially were mistaken, so I went and corrected them in my logbook. Because it's in the electronic format, it's possible to correct the dates and identify it. So again, the best practice would be to update your logbook as soon as you perform the procedure, or at least at the end of the day, so that you do not miss out on these dates. Now again, here's the thing with independent operating. Some of you may be in a position where you are fairly senior and you have your own lists and you operate. So you cannot put PBAs for such operations, because if you put that it was independently performed, then you put a PBA for it. The question again comes as to who supervised you. So be careful that you are not caught out on these. Now, another question which is commonly asked is, how can I put myself as a first surgeon? I mean, my consultant was with me and he did part of the procedure. One of the accepted criteria is if you have done a 70% of the procedure, you can put yourself as first surgeon. Again, for CBDs, the case-based discussions, there are a number of multiple assessments required, especially for the mandatory ones. I believe in orthopedics the number of mandatory has increased from 10 to 14. Please make sure that you have multiple assessments from a variety of trainers, and this gives an idea. Now again, when your trainer fills in your PBA, do get them to put some comments here or write a few words here. It doesn't have to be very long, but they do need to see something, and so try and do not leave it blank. Now, the updated evidence for trauma and orthopedics says you need 1,800 cases on an average of 300 per year. Do not be upset if it's not exactly 300 per year. Some years it may be 250 and another year it might be 350. That happens when you work in major centers and less busy hospitals. But again, what's important to show is the evidence of progression in operative skills for the index procedures. At the end of your PBA CBDs, if you have all of them, make sure you collect them. Put a summary table according to your subspecialty. Now, as far as orthopedics is concerned, divide it into trauma, upper limb, mandatory, peds, hip and knee, foot and ankle, and spine. I put all the number of PBAs and CBDs and added and tabulated them, and the total came to 236. Now, this was for 5 years, and the UK trainee, as for current standard, has to do about 40 assessments per year, making it 14 to 5 of about 200. So I got just about more than that, to be sure on the safe side, because essentially the PBA assessment started from 2013. So when I submitted my application in late 2018, there was only 5 years of such evidence to submit. So do go through the GMC's guidance on this. It's very exhaustive, and do make sure you read it in its entirety. As against for the RITAs, ARCPs, and the training assessments, this is where you collate all the evidence, put them into groups, and then you can finally submit. The final bit is some updated evidence on orthopedics. As we again went, they expect 1,260 of 1,800 cases to be as first surgeon. The good news is bilateral cases can count as 2 operations. So if you're doing a bilateral foot surgery, say scarf osteotomies, you can put them as 2 osteotomies, and that's good. Injections do not count, so make sure you're not caught out there. There are some exceptions. So you see you need about 3 level 4 PBAs in each group by 2 or more trainers, except for these 2. So for them, 1 apparently is enough.